ranking Jane Austen's heroines from worst to best. It is a truth universally acknowledged that some of Jane Austen's heroines are better than others. Although she gained little recognition for her work during her lifetime, Jane Austen's 6 published novels are now considered classics. Her sharply observed portraits of manners and marriage in Regency England have been adapted dozens of times and fueled the imagination of readers for over 200 years. But which of Austen's heroines is best? PopTonic editor Erin Long put her Austen fanhood to the test and ranked the novelist's leading ladies from worst to best. Let's see if you agree with Erin's ranking. Number 7, Emma Woodhouse from Emma. Emma Woodhouse has every possible advantage in life, including beauty, brains, and wealth. She's also spoiled and convinced that she knows better than everyone, and her constant meddling in other people's affairs causes no end of grief for those in her orbit. After nearly destroying the happiness of her closest friends, Jane Fairfax and Harriet Smith, Emma finally learns the error of her ways. She eventually marries Mr. Knightley, who is her neighbor and 16 years her senior. He's also the only person in the novel not to be entirely charmed by Emma, and calls her out when she behaves badly. Without Mr. Knightley's steadying influence, Emma might have remained immature and headstrong. Number 6, Marion Dashwood from Sense and Sensibility. Marion is a bit of a brat, to be honest. Her carefree attitude nearly ruins her when she falls for the rakish Willoughby. She's the kind of overly dramatic friend who would constantly text you about her love life and never take any of your advice. After Willoughby breaks her heart, she begins to see that the loyal Colonel Brandon could offer her something more lasting and stable than a passionate affair. The dynamic between Marion and Brandon is similar to Emma and Mr. Knightley. Both men are much older than their eventual wives, and both women are immature for their ages. Marion's behavior wouldn't seem out of place in a modern young adult novel, so perhaps the moral of the story is that teenagers have always been extra. Number 5, Catherine Moreland from Northanger Abbey. Even though Catherine suffers from severe main character syndrome, believing that it's her destiny to be caught up in some gothic romance, she's not so bad. Her overactive imagination nearly ruins her romance with Henry Tilney, and she eventually realizes that real life is just as interesting as her favorite novels. She's less spoiled than Emma, and not quite as reckless as Marianne. Catherine is sheltered and naive, but her heart is in the right place. Number 4, Fanny Price from Mansfield Park. Fanny Price is not much fun compared to Austen's other leading ladies. She has a strong, even inflexible, moral code. She disapproves of seemingly everything and everyone, especially her fun-loving wealthy cousins with whom she is sent to live with as a child. Okay, but let's be honest, the Crawfords are awful people, and Fanny cannot afford to make a single misstep for fear of being thrown out. And worse than that, the Crawfords continually put her down and make sure she knows her place. Unlike the more privileged heroines of her other novels, Austen's most misunderstood main characters simply cannot afford to be outgoing or naive. Even after being deceived by Henry Crawford, she remains true to herself. Fanny Price is the most grown-up of Austen's heroines. Number 3, Eleanor Dashwood from Sense and Sensibility. After her father dies and they are forced out of their home, Eleanor has little choice but to hold it together for her family. While Marianne is off canoodling with a rake, Eleanor is quietly, helplessly in love with Edward. Even though Eleanor is younger than Emma, she is much more mature. Her apparent lack of emotion is due to her keen understanding of how the Dashwoods' reduced circumstances impact their social standing. Like Fanny Price, Eleanor knows that if she puts a foot out of line, it could jeopardize her entire family. Throughout the novel, Eleanor performs emotional labor for her mother, sisters, and friends. She eventually gets a version of a happy ending when Edward is disinherited after his engagement to Lucy is made public. Lucy drops him and marries Edward's younger brother, who is now the heir, leaving Edward and Eleanor free to marry. We can hope that Eleanor finds happiness as a clergyman's wife, but she remains the poorest of Austen's heroines even after her marriage. Number 2, Anne Elliott from Persuasion. Anne Elliott is 27 and unmarried when the story begins. In other words, she's an old maid. Her family is forced to rent out their grand home and move to cheaper lodgings to make ends meet. Their new tenant just so happens to be the brother of Captain Wentworth, the man that Anne was persuaded not to marry 7 years earlier. Both Anne and Wentworth are older and wiser the second time they meet. No longer the naive young woman, Anne now knows her own mind, and Wentworth, having earned fame and fortune due to his wartime service, is able to overcome his bitterness at being rejected once he realizes how rare it is to get a second chance at happiness. Anne is also wholly unlike the heroines of Austen's other novels, who were usually between 19 and 21, and seems like the closest thing to a stand-in for the author in her work. Number 1, Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. Elizabeth Bennet is by far the most popular and enduring of Jane Austen's heroines, and Pride and Prejudice remains the author's most beloved book. Even though she was created over 200 years ago, there's something modern about Lizzie. She's sassy, even snarky. The Bennets feel like a modern, dysfunctional family with all their squabbling and drama. The story is one that feels at home in any era or culture. Her family's position is respectable, if not especially wealthy, which gives Lizzie more freedom to be outspoken than Fanny Price. She's just 20 years old, so she lacks Anne Elliott's hard-earned wisdom, but she is not as immature as Emma. Not to mention, Elizabeth and Darcy help each other become better people. They both learn to be less judgmental after Darcy's first disastrous proposal. They are equally matched, true soulmates. So, what do you think? Do you agree with our ranking? If not, let us know in the comments who your favorite Jane Austen heroine is. And for more stories like this one, make sure to subscribe and check out PopTonic.com.